The film begins in darkness, with an eerie mix-up of faces, as if it's someone's imagination or nightmare. The scene then shifts to Karoline, who is washing her hands and face when her landlord arrives with some people to show the house. This is because Karoline hasn't paid rent in a long time. Karoline tries to persuade her landlord to give her some time, promising to clear all her debts, but he's fed up with her excuses. Karoline tries to offer her landlord some money from her savings, but he refuses and brings in a woman and her daughter to view the house. As the woman is inspecting the house, Karoline warns her that there are a lot of big rats in the house that come out at night and make a mess. Upon hearing this, the woman's daughter becomes frightened and insists that they leave immediately. The woman slaps her daughter so hard and then pays the landlord in advance to secure the house. The landlord tells Karoline that he'll find her another place to stay that she can afford. Then Karoline boards a bus and heads to the tailor's workshop where she works. After finishing her job, she visits a house with a rent of 15 kroner per week. The room is in a terrible state, with water dripping from the ceiling into the room. Karoline tries to open the window, but it's stuck due to rust. Moreover, guests are not allowed here. The next day, the manager takes Karoline to Meathead Jorgen because she had appealed for widow supplements. Karoline explains that her landlord evicted her from the apartment. Jorgen asks Karoline for her husband's death certificate, which she doesn't have because her husband, Peter, is a soldier who has been missing for a long time. And without the death certificate, Karoline's request can't be granted. However, seeing Karoline's desperate situation, Jorgen offers to help by asking for her husband's name and using his connections to try to track him down. Karoline has moved into the same rundown room where rainwater is leaking from the ceiling, and she's placed a bucket underneath, while she's busy making crochet. She hears the sound of rain, then gets up and tries to open the window again. After a few attempts, the window opens, and Karoline sits outside with her crochet. Afterwards, she's sitting on a bench in a park, where Jorgen has asked to meet her. Jorgen informs her that he couldn't find any information about her husband, neither among the living soldiers nor the fallen ones. Then, they start walking together. As they walk, Jorgen notices a chestnut vendor and takes Karoline there to enjoy roasted chestnuts. After offering Karoline some comfort, Jorgen leaves her there. With the passage of time, Karoline and Jorgen start dating. On the road, a boy is seen selling newspapers about the end of the war. Later, Jorgen addresses his employees, announcing the war's end and leading a prayer for the fallen soldiers. During this, Jorgen and Karoline exchange smiles. Jorgen declares that uniform production will cease and they will return to manufacturing soft linen, his family's signature product. Everyone then engages in Christmas celebrations. During this, Jorgen gives his mistress an elegant Christmas gift, a fancy dress, which delights Karoline. As everyone is leaving the factory, a man is standing outside, calling out to Karoline as she exits. Karoline glances back at him and then ignores him, walking away. The man calls out to her again, stopping her. Karoline angrily turns around to face the man, who's wearing a mask on his mouth. She walks up to him, angrily removes the mask from his mouth and throws it away. The man picks up the mask, puts it back on, and looks at Karoline. Then Karoline takes the man home where the landlady asks Karoline about him. Karoline introduces the man as her friend, but he reveals to the landlady that he's Karoline's husband, Peter. It turns out Peter wasn't dead. He was alive and has now returned, only to find Karoline with someone else. I feel sorry for him. After a while, Karoline and Peter have a questioning session, and it's revealed that Peter was missing due to his injuries. Later, they sit down for a meal, where Peter struggles to eat with his mask on. Karoline informs Peter about her affair and her pregnancy. Peter looks at her, realizing this is his wife. Karoline angrily tells him to leave. Peter slowly gets up and leaves without finishing his meal. Afterwards, Karoline meets Jorgen and proposes marriage. Jorgen agrees to marry Karoline. Then Karoline wears the Christmas dress Jorgen gave her and goes to his house. Jorgen's mother takes Karoline to undress for a doctor's examination to confirm her pregnancy. After the checkup, the doctor confirms Karoline is pregnant. Jorgen's mother wants an abortion, but the doctor says it's too late. She tells Karoline that Jorgen will never marry her. Unconvinced, the mother calls her son and says he can marry Karoline, but without inheriting the mansion or business. After hearing his mother, Jorgen apologizes to Karoline for not being able to marry her. Furthermore, Jorgen's mother also fires Karoline from her factory job. Frustrated and desperate, Karoline prepares for a bath, secretly taking a needle with her. In the bathtub, she attempts to perform an abortion on herself using the needle, experiencing excruciating pain. She tries to silence her cries, but the pain becomes unbearable, and she submerges herself in the water. Dagmar, a woman nearby, notices Karoline's struggles and rushes to her aid, pulling her out of the bathtub. She discovers Karoline is bleeding profusely and quickly fetches towels to help stop the bleeding. Dagmar then takes Karoline outside, trying to assist her as Karoline hastily departs. Dagmar offers to help Karoline by finding a family to adopt her unborn child, but in return, she'll charge a fee. Dagmar hands Karoline her address and leaves. As Karoline returns home, the landlady hands her an envelope left by a man. The landlady keeps the rent and hands Karoline the remaining amount. Karoline then visits various places in search of employment, but is unsuccessful. While walking, she notices a poster on the wall advertising a circus. Karoline arrives at the circus, where performers are entertaining the crowd. The host invites a soldier involved in the war onto the stage. As Karoline watches, she's shocked to see that the soldier is her husband, Peter. The host asks everyone to turn their attention to Peter, and Peter starts to remove his glasses and mask. As soon as Peter removes his mask, the audience gasps and covers their eyes. They start bullying Peter, calling him a monster and using other hurtful words because his face is severely wounded. He was badly injured during the war, which disfigured his face, leaving his jaw and lips mangled. This is why he always wears a mask. The host dares the audience to touch Peter, saying, "No one fancies touching the poor freak." Everyone looks at Peter with disgust, and some don't even want to look at him. Then Karoline raised her hand. The host appreciates Karoline's courage. When Karoline touches Peter's face, the audience shows their disgust. The host asks Karoline to kiss Peter. Then Karoline takes Peter home. Peter lies on the floor near the window, sighing. Pregnant Karoline gets up from the bed and tries to comfort him, but he suddenly attacks her, screaming and crying. The landlady starts beating the door to inspect, but Karoline tells her to shut up. Peter then calms himself down by administering a morphine injection. While working, Karoline starts experiencing labor pains. An elderly woman helps Karoline give birth to a baby girl among the vegetables. Karoline returns home with the baby, and Peter lovingly picks up the baby and names her Susie. Karoline is surprised by Peter's affection, wondering why he's showing so much love to a child that's not his. Karoline doesn't want to raise the child, but Peter treats her like his own. The next day, Peter brings home a cradle for the baby. Meanwhile, Karoline secretly takes the baby out of the house and heads to Dagmar's place, where Svensson answers the door. Afterwards, Dagmar takes the baby and some money from Karoline. However, Karoline doesn't have enough money, so she asks for time to pay the rest. Dagmar recognizes Karoline as the girl with the needle. Then Dagmar writes down the baby's information in her diary, planning to find a good family for her, such as lawyers or doctors. After Karoline breastfeeds her baby, Dagmar tightly binds her to stop lactation. The baby lies on the sofa, crying, and Karoline wants to say goodbye, but Dagmar stops her. Karoline meets Frida and tells her about Dagmar. Seeing the baby, Karoline's maternal instincts kick in, and she visits Dagmar again the next day. Dagmar demands the money Karoline owes her, but she doesn't have it. Karoline had come to Dagmar's place under the pretext of breastfeeding her baby, but Dagmar had already sent the baby away. Karoline notices Dagmar behaving strangely, as if she's caught a chill. Karoline asks her, and Dagmar asks for a blanket. Karoline offers to work for Dagmar to repay her debt. She suggests that she can take care of feeding the babies who come to Dagmar's place until they're adopted by new families. Dagmar asks Karoline to feed her own daughter, Irina. Karoline starts living with Dagmar and takes care of Irina, as well as the other babies who arrive. She spends her days feeding and caring for the children. Then one day, Karoline starts searching through Dagmar's diary to find out which family Dagmar gave her daughter to. As she's searching, Svensson arrives and tries to flirt with Karoline, but she ignores him. Karoline's presence helps alleviate Dagmar's loneliness, and they start spending quality time together, whether it's going to the cinema or staying at home. One day, Karoline tells Dagmar about Svensson's behavior, saying that he tries to flirt with her just like he does with Dagmar. Then, during Irina's birthday celebrations, Dagmar herself notices Svensson giving Karoline a lustful gaze. As a result, Dagmar bans Svensson from visiting her home. Later, on a rainy day, a crying girl holding a baby arrives at Dagmar's house, where Karoline receives her. Karoline assumes the girl is the baby's mother, but it turns out the baby belongs to the girl's mother. The girl, frightened, tries to hand over the baby and some money to Karoline and leave, but the door is locked. Dagmar arrives, unlocks the door, comforts the girl, and sends her away. Karoline takes care of the baby until a suitable family is found. Karoline was sleeping with the baby when Irina came to wake Karoline for feeding. When Karoline didn't wake up, Irina sat down beside them and put her hand over the baby's mouth, causing the baby to cry. Karoline immediately woke up, checked the baby, and then scolded and slapped Irina. The next day, Dagmar prepares to take the baby to a new family. Karoline asks Dagmar about the family, but Dagmar doesn't reveal any information. Karoline thinks that Dagmar is taking the baby away because she slapped Irina. Dagmar takes the baby out of the house in a baby walker. Karoline secretly follows Dagmar. While following, Karoline sees Dagmar turning into a secluded area. When Karoline observes Dagmar from a distance, she appears to be hitting the baby. Karoline is shocked at what she sees. As Dagmar turns around, Karoline hides. Then Dagmar leaves and Karoline rushes to the spot where Dagmar was hitting the baby. Upon arrival, Karoline finds a street hole. It means Dagmar ruthlessly murders children and throws them into the hole. This is outrageous. A woman with such a cruel nature deserves to be pushed into the hole and killed. After committing the crime, when Dagmar returns home, Karoline is lying on the bed, shivering. Dagmar approaches Karoline, who asks about her daughter. Dagmar, as usual, tells lies about the children's better life. But this time, Karoline doesn't believe her, because she has discovered the truth, how ruthlessly Dagmar kills and disposes of the children. Dagmar consoles Karoline and gives her sedative medicine, which puts Karoline to sleep. Karoline is sleeping, but suddenly wakes up and sees Peter sitting in the darkness in front of her, calling her. Karoline gets scared and runs away. Then Dagmar arrives, having a meal for Karoline, and gives her a sedative treatment. As a result, Karoline starts seeing Dagmar and Peter's faces mixed up in an illusionary way. After this, Karoline asks Dagmar about herself, and it is revealed that Dagmar is from the countryside, where she used to milk cows, and so on. When another woman arrives with her child, Frida is also present. Karoline watches from the doorway, and Frida notices her. Dagmar brings the child to Karoline and orders her to squeeze the child to death. However, when Karoline refuses, Dagmar starts killing the child herself. Irina watches from under the table, covering her ears as the child screams. Dagmar throws Karoline on the bed, gets on top of her, and kills the child. Karoline tries to struggle and save the child, but fails. The ruthless Dagmar then burns the child's body within the house. Afterwards, Karoline and Dagmar are sleeping when there's a knock at the door. Another woman arrives to take her child back and calls out to Karoline. The woman threatens to call the police. Dagmar gets up and approaches the door, but instead of opening it, she returns and tells Karoline and Irena to get dressed. She herself gets ready and hides the child's remains and bones under the carpet. Karoline stands by the window while the police arrive at the door and call out to Dagmar. Dagmar tries to stop Karoline from jumping, but Karoline doesn't listen and jumps out the window. The police then break down the door, enter, and arrest Dagmar. On the other side, Karoline jumps out of the window and falls onto the grass below as if she's dead, but she's not. She gets up and runs to where Peter is with his companions. Karoline arrives, exhausted, and collapses. Peter rushes to her side. Later, Peter is sitting with his circus colleagues eating lunch, while Karoline is sleeping in a costume room. When Karoline wakes up, she gets up, staggering, drinks water, and vomits. Then she washes her face and starts reading the newspaper, which has a report about Dagmar's arrest. Peter arrives, asks her to go with him, then sits beside her and asks about the child, while Karoline is searching for medicines. Peter wakes up and calls her to his side. They then look at each other in the mirror and start communicating through hand gestures. The scene shifts to a high court, where Dagmar's trial is taking place for the murder of 35 babies. The crowd curses Dagmar, and the mothers demand justice for their children. The lawyer suspects Dagmar's claim that Irena is her biological daughter due to her age. The law has placed Irena in an orphanage. Dagmar tries to prove her innocence, but the people around her demand her execution and curse her to hell. As the lawyer takes Dagmar away, her eyes meet Karoline's, who is among the crowd waiting for justice. Afterwards, Karoline visits an orphanage to adopt a 7-year-old girl and completes the necessary documentation. The caretaker brings Irena, who is overjoyed to see Karoline, and runs to hug her. The film ends here. If you like this movie, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel.